Good day, everyone. My name is Shri. Today, I'm going to present our paper titled "Can GraphQL Replace REST? A Study of Their Efficiency and Viability." The co-authors of this paper are Benjamin, Joshua, and Dr. Baysal. So as we all know, REST is a software architectural style for providing standards between computer systems on the web, whereas GraphQL is an open source data query and manipulation language for APIs, and this is developed by Facebook. And both these are either used in conjunction or as alternative to each other based on the purpose of the application. So the paper tries to compare these two APIs quantitatively through a constructed custom API client, and qualitatively by analyzing the survey responses from the GitHub employees who are experienced in using both these APIs. The results show that both the APIs have benefits and weaknesses, and inferred that one cannot replace the other, at least in near future. So before going into this work, we will briefly look at the background and the literature work related to these APIs. The major design point of REST is that any machine that supports HTTP can effectively implement or communicate with a REST compliant service. Or moreover, REST specifies a clear separation of client and server, and also the client and server are not aware of each other's states, and hence REST is called a stateless protocol. As we know, REST consists of HTTP verb, a path to the resource, a header, and a body. Whereas on the other hand, GraphQL is a schema language to describe an API, an API query language, and a server-side runtime for executing queries. In other words, GraphQL specifications define the schema language and query language that provides a strongly typed hierarchical way to describe resources as types, which are connected through graph relationship. In essence, REST has inbuilt cache mechanism, and in GraphQL, queries can be customized and has the ability to request and receive only the required data. So this paper investigates if GraphQL is better than REST or not, and if so, can we replace it? Coming to the literature work, these are some of the literature works carried out in this area. For instance, Witten et al. Studied the gains achieved between GraphQL and REST by creating GraphQL wrappers for existing REST-like APIs in 2018. And in 2019, the same authors analyzed the strengths and weaknesses of GraphQL API and highlighted the security issues around that. And another paper is in 2020, Brito and Validity conducted a controlled qualitative experiment involving 22 students using both GraphQL and REST, and they concluded that GraphQL outperformed REST. So there is, in summary, there is not a lot of literature that empirically compares the gains between REST and GraphQL. And also there are no studies that really combine quantitatively and qualitative analysis to test both the APIs. So this paper attempts to bridge the gap by analyzing the two APIs using both quantitative and qualitative methods. Coming to the methodology, here are the three RQs we try to answer through this work. The first one is, how do REST and GraphQL compare in terms of efficiency of a single request? What are the benefits and weaknesses of REST and GraphQL? And which API is more likely to be adopted by developers? So the methodology behind the quantitative analysis is it is constructed by testing specific scenarios using GitHub public APIs, and analyzes the efficiency, which is measured in terms of request response, server computation and request handling, and amount of memory used by each architecture. And this is an example figure which shows both REST and GraphQL requesting the same data and satisfying the same needs in order to produce the same JSON response. A software was developed to make a number of repeating requests to a HTTP endpoint and can record response time for each request. And coming to the methodology behind the qualitative analysis, 38 GitHub software developers who have experience in using both GraphQL and REST API were surveyed. And the questions goes like this: participants' background, role, and level of expertise, a situational use case to understand their perception of these two APIs, and Likert scale questions and expectations of the adoption of these two APIs in 5 to 10 years into the future. So this study is also approved by CURA, which is Carleton University Ethics Review Board, and also the characteristics of the 38 participants are as below, as shown. The 90% of the participants are engineers, and 82% of the participants have 5+ year experience in using these APIs, and also 65% are advanced users in REST API. So coming to the results, where the first RQ is, how does REST and GraphQL compare in terms of efficiency of a single request? So here is a query 1, wherein the graph clearly shows that there is no significant difference between both the APIs, both REST and GraphQL. And the query 2 also shows that there is no significant difference between both the APIs. Whereas query 3, when the request was sent, it was shown that GraphQL performed better than REST. Whereas in query 4, when the request was sent, REST performed better than GraphQL. So this is the table that describes the overall results. And so based on the quantitative analysis, there is no clear winner between REST and GraphQL. And that is like on 2 of the 4 queries, both APIs performance was same. And on 1 query, REST performed better, and the other query, GraphQL performed better. So coming to the second RQ, what are the benefits and downsides of REST and GraphQL? And this is based on the quantitative study, based on the qualitative study. So a survey was conducted for 38 software developers, and even for this RQ from the survey, it became evident that there is no clear winner, as each API have their own pros and cons. And here are the pros and cons of REST, which summarizes that REST has a matured ecosystem of libraries and tools, and it is easy to learn. And but however, it is prone to overfetching, and it makes multiple round trip requests, and the responsibility is on the developer to ensure it is implemented correctly. Coming to the GraphQL pros and cons, GraphQL has the potential to increase project performance. However, it is not simple to use, not easy to test and maintain, and not suitable for larger projects that require faster product development. Interestingly, it is found out that only a minority of the developers thought that lack of caching mechanism as a cause of concern here. So coming to the RQ3, how do software developers view REST compared with GraphQL? So this is based on both qualitative and quantitative results. So first question is about the efficiency, like does GraphQL API make it easier to efficiently request resources? And as we can see, 50% agree and strongly agree to this. And the question about adoption, wherein does organizations with public REST APIs benefit from adopting GraphQL, and 47% agree to this. Coming to the question about maintainability, is GraphQL API more maintainability is having more maintainability than REST? And here 34% strongly disagreed, and 42% remained neutral. And with respect to the qualitative question, where the level of adoption of GraphQL over the next 5 years, it is found out that 57% believe that adoption rate would receive higher adoption. And coming to the adoption of REST, 65% believe that the rate would continue to remain the same, and 21 indicated that the adoption would increase. So coming to the discussions and conclusions, so in an overfetching scenario, GraphQL might not overperform REST, but whereas in underfetching scenarios, GraphQL would be more efficient than REST. And in essence, GraphQL has a potential to become a viable alternative to REST, So according to the majority of the survey participants, one should consider GraphQL over REST if one desires to make it easier to request resources efficiently. So these are some of the pitfalls for using GraphQL, maybe because the pitfalls are not due to the efficiency. This could be because, as discussed earlier, GraphQL is a recent API that is still emerging, and it's not in use because of REST is having a good framework and tools to implement. That's the reason REST is more seem to be efficient and more in use. So so the knowledge about the GraphQL is not at widespread when compared to REST. And these factors could be mitigated by increased adoption of GraphQL, and which a majority, like 57% of the participants anticipated would be over the next 5 years. So threats to validity, as all the works have threats, this paper too have some threats. Like, for example, the REST and GraphQL are treated as black boxes here, and that however, it is very likely that GitHub models their REST and GraphQL using shared modeling, since it would require less code for them to maintain two interfaces which behave the same. And this study analyzed only 4 queries. A larger sample of REST and GraphQL query pairs would be ideal. And also the qualitative survey only relied on a small subset, which is 38 developers, software developers. So they might not represent the whole software developers community. And this study only focused on GitHub APIs, which is a Ruby on Rails implementation. So other GraphQL APIs could be implemented differently and could potentially yield different results. So as a conclusion, this paper explored whether GraphQL is viable alternative API architecture over REST by measuring and comparing the time for performance efficiency in terms of request response, and by assessing their benefits and weaknesses and gathering developers' perspectives on the two API architectures. And in essence, GraphQL cannot yet replace REST. Notwithstanding, GraphQL would achieve a greater acceptance over next 5 years. Thank you.